To this now, Icasa has decided to recall the temporarily assigned radio frequency spectrum that was granted to mobile operators by no later than the 30th of November this year. The temporary spectrum had allowed network operators to offer consumers lower price packages, faster speeds, and free mobile and money transactions. To get more information on this decision and why it was made, importantly, I'm joined now by Dr. Keabetswe Modimoeng, who is the acting chairperson of the Independent Communications Authority of South Africa. Dr. Modimoeng, thank you so much for talking to me. And just as a broad question, what decision have you made around the radio frequency spectrum and why?
Greetings to us and greetings to the viewers. Indeed, as the authority, we have informed our licensees recently that come end of November, they should return the temporary spectrum that is allocated to them. As the authority, we licensed the temporary spectrum last year, around April, when the country was in hard lockdown. We did so, and the initial expiry date was supposed to be November 2020. We extended in March again of 2021. We extended in June again of 2021. And even at the end of August, it's a hybrid. It's a combination between, culling or the assignments, but as well as giving them a winding down period to return it. Spectrum is a scarce resource. It belongs to the people of South Africa. It cannot be licensed in any other fashion in the long run other than through the one we have determined, which is an auction. Extending this temporary spectrum in perpetuity has a direct bearing to us and the viewers in terms of the competition landscape in the market. When we licensed the spectrum, we had just entered the hard lockdown. It was a time and space of the unknowns. As a result, not all network mobile operators are benefiting, by the way, from this temporary spectrum. Some did not apply, knowing very well that it was a very temporary measure. Some applied, were given the temporary spectrum in various configurations. They wrote to us a day or so after assignment, requested that we swap what we had given them. The authority refused with an understanding that it is only a temporary measure. Now, if we are to perpetuate this beyond what we have already done, it becomes very problematic because it tilts the competitive landscape in the market. Number two, when we were responding to Parliament sometime in May of this year, we cautioned operators against, what seemed to be, a configuration of their business models in the long term around this temporary assignment. And I guess part of this, discontentment and noise we are hearing seems to be centered around that point. It's a temporary measure. Spectrum has to be, according to the International Telecommunications Union and our spectrum management regulations, it has
to be your reading, though,
in a transparent manner.
Is it your reading, Dr. Modimoeng, that the need that gave rise to this granting of the temporary spectrum to the operators that are licensed with you, that need has now been obviated in that, we no longer have the high demand for data services as happened during the hard lockdown, more people working from home and needing faster speeds for, virtual meetings and the likes, and including entertainment, which is a valid reason as well for data usage. Do you believe that we've weathered the storm of that and therefore can revert back to normal? Normal in the sense that, you talk about spectrum auctions, and yet that hasn't happened yet.
Yeah, no, indeed. I mean, we are not saying the need has completely faded away. We will be responsible to say so. But just a few days ago, even the Concord said elections can proceed. To us, as you drive in the morning, you see traffic piling up. Public schools, learners are going back to school. That does not mean the pandemic is over. Even during the lifespan of this national state of disaster, there was a time when government, having considered a number of factors, had to stop the 350 COVID grants. So what I'm just trying to say is that licensing spectrum, and it's something that needs to be understood, licensing spectrum temporarily was an extraordinary, unprecedented measure occasioned by an unprecedented situation in our country. We are still in a pandemic, but you and I will agree that we are not, today as we speak, we are not in the same circumstances we were under on the 26th of March last year when the hard lockdown began. And we need to then show as a regulator that we are responsive to that changing climate while simultaneously trying all in our power day and night to resolve this impasse so that the licensing of high demand spectrum through an auction can take place. So we are not saying the pandemic is over. We are not saying there is no need. And another important aspect is that our licensees have got spectrum allocated. I mean, that's why they operate. So they need, within what they are currently allocated, need to continue providing services. But the issue of tilting the competitive landscape of the sector indefinitely, simply because there is a certain degree of work from home and so forth, it becomes an overkill.
And in fact, Dr. Modimoeng, you talk about a certain degree of demand for working from home. I would say to you that actually the demand for data, accessible and affordable data, is actually likely to go even higher, given that we are going for elections in the context of a pandemic. The implications are huge here. And I'm just wondering if you've factored in, I get what you're saying about the operators that you've licensed, that you believe some of them started structuring their business models around something that was always temporary in nature. Let's park that aside in your argument that they have spectrum allocated to them anyway. What do you say to the South African this afternoon, this evening, who is now looking at the prospect that when those operators revert back to their original working models, the data prices are likely to go higher, speeds are likely to, drop, and people who need to be doing remote learning when, there's an outbreak at a school and the decision is taken that some of the pupils must join via MS Teams. In some areas, some of them won't be able to do that. Address those people specifically.
Yeah, but I think, Thulas, we are talking, the reality you are projecting will come into full fruition end of November. I think, first and foremost, we never took an abrupt decision to end this process. And in this 3-month window, we are giving operators an opportunity to, remodel their network and quality of service provision in a manner they have been doing before. So the reality you are projecting is not something like we've pulled the plug and overnight there will be a blackout, as some have suggested. And indeed, public service is our mandate, but I believe that patriotism is a mandate of both public and private institutions. And that is why, on a separate process, because these are two separate processes, we are appealing. By the time we got interdicted, we were literally 3 weeks away from conducting an auction. So we are appealing to the conscience, appealing, not blackmailing, appealing to the conscience of those very mobile operators and eMedia, your parent company, by the way, to go into the negotiations table and factor in all those issues you have just highlighted, which are in the public interest and require some serious high levels of patriotism to ensure that the authority, Icasa, is not forced by circumstances to perpetuate something it should not be doing, which is this temporary spectrum in the long run, given the negative effects of doing so in the long run. But on the other side, to make sure that we bring certainty through the licensing of high demand spectrum through an auction, which gives certainty to everyone. Operators always talk about their investors, but equally, there is a section in our society that can say, Icasa, you are not transparent. Why are you giving this high resource of ours to mobile operators for close to nothing? How do I then respond to that?
Right. Lastly, then, talk to me about, you were in some kind of engagements to basically, draw that litigation that you allude to to a close, in an amicable kind of way. How's that progressing, and what are its implications, that process, for the future, spectrum auction? Because as you and I have made abundantly clear in the last few minutes, if we're not going to have this temporary allocation, we're certainly going to need something that is more permanent and more systemic and sustainable. So how far are you in trying to find one another between the parties?
No, thank you very much for that. Thulas, we negotiations have been ongoing day and night, as I have said. And as matters stand, we have until the 15th of September, at least from a judicial case management point of view, to really now, as all parties really conclude on whether there is a settlement or not. And I think we are trying all we can do on our side. There has been a lot of movement. Parties are no longer where they were. There are still some challenging aspects. We remain optimistic. And as I've said, we really urge an appeal to industry players. We urge an appeal to all the litigants involved in this matter to make sure that we find a speedy resolution. It's not about Icasa, it's not about the minister, it's not about anyone. It is about the best interest of South Africans. So, as I've said, according to case management processes before the judge, we hope by the 15th, we will really get a sense of what is happening. And Icasa will, in any event, in the coming week, give a more comprehensive update in this regard.
All right, I've got to thank you for your time and your insights there. That's Dr. Keabetswe Modimoeng, who is the chairperson of the Independent Communications Authority of South Africa, Icasa. And I've got to correct that because in the introduction, I had said in an acting capacity, it would seem he has been appointed substantively. So I do need to get that cleared for you.